My name is William Salisbury, and I'm here with Drafting Book Design. Today we're going to do a quick, brief, but very detailed explanation of the differences between the older and newer versions of CADWorx Plant 3D. So let's go ahead and jump on in. As you can see, I have the CADWorx interface right up here. We have a splash screen that shows us some of our most recently accessed documents and a lot of other stuff that you won't use that much, I don't imagine. We'll go ahead and start with the drawing. Grabs from templates that we already have made. There we go. So let's go ahead and jump into our southwest environment. So we're in an isometric plane. For people used to the older version of the software, you may be familiar with this spec. This spec right here will pull from whatever you're currently running. There we go. So you may have been used to setting these variables in a size window, something like this, where you would set the spec and you would set your size in individual ones. You set the main and the reduction. In this case, you do all that in your spec view palette. That's been the case for a while, so that shouldn't be new to anybody. From here, you can select all of your different components as if it were a spec sheet. They're color-coded. Red, it normally means a reducing component, and blue means optional. You can change these settings right here in the settings pane and pick a color that you want it to be associated with. But by default, red's reducing, magenta is optional, blue is optional. So you have the option to show optional components, or if you don't want optional to be available, uncheck. Simple as that. Okay, now that you have a basic understanding of where you're going to come from for your components, you can go ahead and click on one of them and start modeling up. As you can see, automatically we have our pipe router built into the software. So once you select one object and you start putting it into the system, it wants to keep continuing on, which is awesome. If you click the middle node on pipes, you can also make size adjustments, moving it 10 feet, 10 inches in this case. So there you go, pipe router. So besides just accessing the components from the spec view palette, you now have the option to come here and click on these plus signs, which will continue pipe, in this case, like this. Or it will also create a component, piping fitting, that will let you continue on routing the pipe. But it goes beyond that even. If I come over here, click the plus sign. Now, right now it's going to want to jump into the pipe router and route more pipe from that location. I do have the option, and depending on how you're set up, to right-click and go to my component list. A component list will let me quickly jump to, let's say right here, instead of continuing the pipe, I need to add in a valve, block valve. Go ahead and put in a ball valve. Doesn't particularly matter. Okay, as you can see, I also have CADWorx associated with this component, so probably shouldn't have put it down, but you know, you get the general idea. But how do we correct that? Oh, I don't know. It could be anything. Well, up here in this lovely little thing, we have a miscellaneous panel, and in that panel we have a CADWorx change button. So I click the component, right click, and down here in my options I have change orientation, and bam, corrected. So that's pretty nice. It used to be once you created CADWorx, it was locked in. You'd have to rotate the component, and we all know that's a taboo. Okay, we got all that, Let's see what else we have here. That's the basics for putting in components. Go ahead and put in a couple more just to show you. Component list. Save valve again. Okay, that's some gear actuation. Okay, let's say that we have an issue and we are coming from over here and we want this to come all the way over here. So now you have an option. once you click the plus sign. You can right click and hit connect. What connect allows you to do is to pick another point, and see down here you can see, do you want to shorten the length by connecting pipe? You say yes or no. I say yes, and it says, do you want to preview the modes by components or by lines? I want to see the lines. Well, we don't want a direct portion, so we'll choose that. It says, would you like to select again? Nope. And it automatically creates that connection. So the connect function can be good if you're pretty far away from something and you want to see the available routing options. It will give you a good place to start off, even if you have to make slight adjustments, like bringing components line in a little bit more. After you've generated a component, you can click on the center point there, the little grip, and you now have the capacity to move it. Now, as you can see, as I'm moving this, although not perfectly, you can see that it generates a little dimension from the end of pipe, and you can tweak your settings to allow you to see that from various options. Let's see if we get it to come over there. It's not, but okay. So I just put in 10, so it's 10 inches off of the side of there. Yeah. Okay. Now that we have the basics of that, let's see, what should we do on top? Reducing components. Let's go into the setup. A few things have changed there. So as you can see, go into setup. The first thing we see is our configuration file. Okay. And our configuration file allows us, let's go ahead and get to that. This is something that everyone should be familiar with if you've ever used CADWorx. Lets you set up a lot of your defaults, like your layer by line number system, how your bolts are generated, your default isogen style, all these things. So this should be the first step when you're setting up a project, is getting your configuration down. We also can set the default spec, which you should do. Normally you'll have one configuration file, but you'll have several different projects you'll be using that on. So knowing which project to associate that with is important. You can also set up your layers, like if the default layers for your client or for your company. Here's where you would establish those out. Okay. Piping rules are very important. They can shift the way everything works in a very big way. Size rules, making sure that things are the same size if they're connecting to each other, or that it prompts you. Spec rules, if there's a spec change, you know. N-type rules, that can vary depending on what you're doing. Pipe length rules, if you want to have maximum set, minimum set, where it has to be at least this long, this big, the smallest pipe spool you want, etc. How gaskets and bolts are dealt with. When you delete something, does the pipe automatically heal? That can be good and bad. Pipe healing, it depends on how you're running the show, because sometimes you delete a piece of pipe, you really want that piece of pipe deleted. You don't want it to move over the whole model. But you know, that just takes time to get used to, and some other various things as well. Okay, so that's basically, the other two aren't that important. That's introduction to setup. Line numbering is about the same. You can set it to on, where you can just write whatever you want. You can set it to on but dynamic, where it's locked into whatever you set here, which is kind of a if you want everything to be on a particular size and a particular spec, then that's your prerogative. Okay, and go ahead and click cancel on that. Save it. Actually, I don't want that on dynamic. I like to be able to specify my own particular line numbers. Okay, so we went over that. Isogen's about the same. You might have to get used to using iConfigure. So in my setup, I don't. Let me go ahead and show you. Setup. So when we go to configuration files and isogen default style, you see there's not one specified here. Now you can specify one and lock your people into a particular isogen style, and that'll allow you to have good control over it, while my preference is to leave it open. And the reason I do that is because you can just come here to the isogen thing and hit isogen out, isogen match. Because if I leave it blank, it allows me to pick from a selection of options. So if I have a different client that also wants this drawing, or if I have a different style, like if I have a tester, my checker, or my final, I can have access to all three of those styles without having it push me just to one. So I leave it open. If you want control and you're not having the average user isogen out or isogen batch, then go ahead and lock them up. Okay, so let's go ahead and use one of my styles here again. So we're doing an isogen out, which means I can just select everything that's interconnected. And just like before, you select all, you right click to exit. There it goes, one successful. And there we go, one very hodgepodge ISO. Just like in the past with ISOs, to declutter that, you would use an isogen start point to say where you're coming from, and isogen stop points to break up the drawing into controlled sheets. So we'll have one there. These are both going to come here. We'll have them stop there. Okay, that looks like a good breakup. So we'll go ahead and do an isogen out again. Now you would run a batch when you're doing your final. I'm just doing isogen out to test the design, which is how your designers and drafters should operate. If they're not, then they're crazy. Okay, well, that's ugly. Sometimes it does want to break it itself. It makes its own little choices. So this one broke it into 4 when we asked for 3, but yeah, we'll survive. So not bad. You normally want material that's going to fill up most of your bill of material, or at least half of your drawing. So these would be a little bit too small. Especially when you're dealing with pipe, because it can stretch pipe in and out pretty easily. We could probably get away with just leaving that one stop sign. Let's try again. This is why the isogen out function is very important. You want to have the capacity for your designers and drafters to run ISOs and see what's going on out there. Okay, just 2 drawings this time, so we got a little bit better, and it looks a lot neater. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that comes to mind. If you're not familiar with generating bill of materials, that comes up pretty often. Doing your setup, so create your variables that you're going to need to have generate in your bill of material. If you do that, you can do an export. You do total length normally because you want it to add up all the individual pipe. So I'm going to go ahead and select. It lets me export. So I'll say tester. And I'll put that on my desktop. Okay, and we'll come in here. Open up Excel, which is what the bill of material outputs do. It's really good for engineers and stuff like that, or giving it to a vendor for an issue for bid. Okay, go to desktop. Missed it by a shot. There you go. And this is kind of what the output looks like. Normally you put your link before your long description. You can make this cleaned up a little bit or have a template that you apply it to. So and then you can apply this as a table and just clear it up a little bit. As headers and the center of that, couple sizes big or bold. Height 15 and 20. Space to spare. Setting the functions. And that's basically it. So that'll start looking like a regular bill of material. If you wanted to, you could also take that bill of material and put it into here. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of different ways. If you copy from an Excel sheet, and you're in a layout or any 2D space, I can now type, let's see here, paste special, home, paste special. I want this to be AutoCAD entities. Okay. The one downside of this, and I don't know how to fix it just yet, if anyone knows, please comment. Although the information's in here, it shows up in a color that just doesn't want to show. So you'd have to recolor it, and it doesn't seem to want to go automatically. You see, I'm coming over here. Let's go to the properties and table, and it doesn't let you modify the text from the table view. So I end up having to explode it, which is not the end of the world. And from here, I can now come here to text entities and change the layer to, well, change the color. So now what we have is that bill of material that we generated into Excel, and now it's in AutoCAD text and lines. Easily editable, no problems, no snuff. You might have a little bit of overflow, but I'll work with that. So let's see, that's covering that. What else should we hit up on? Back in our model space. Layers are still about the same. You can change colors of a layer from the drop down. These colors are actually enabled, just like turning it on, freezing it, etc. Let's see. Outputs. Exports. Anything that's important. We covered isogen. The palettes are important too. Let's go ahead and hit up on our structural palette here, our pipe support palette. This one doesn't have one set up for it. Well, normally if you have a pipe support modeler palette set up for your project, then you'll be able to access it from here and put in things like U-bolts or pipe shoes. That's all going to be done in your setup. Your setup is going to point to your pipe support area. Okay. Let's see what else we have. Discontinuity view. That's useful. Let's say that we have something that's not quite connected. Do I have auto heal on? I'm pretty sure I shouldn't. Looks like I do have auto heal on. Well, that's never good. Let's go ahead. Problems of the future. Okay, now we have that overlapping. The discontinuity toolbar, the clash detection toolbar, will let you, let's see here. My toolbar is fighting me. Okay. Should see a clash there. That's definitely going through. Well, maybe it's because we don't have line numbers fully set up. It should be the case. Well, it's not responding right now, so we'll just leave that one for an anomaly for later. Your line view palette's very important. Lets you isolate by lines. So, in this case, we'll rename that. And we will associate, grab that, make that the new norm. Okay, and apply that line number to this half. Okay, and I'm going to say A for all. Now, as you see in the line view palette, we have two different line numbers, the one that we just generated. Now, for all of these palettes, you come up here to palettes under CADWorx Plant 1. So, in case you were not sure where the spec view was coming in from, or the line view, most of them are just in that palette area. So you can right-click a particular alignment number from here and isolate it. This is very good in very busy models. Helps you break down so you can edit without the graphic load of dealing with the entire model shifting around you. Okay. Let's see what else we have. Design Center can be useful, especially when you have a client that doesn't have established standards. It lets you open up a standard drawing that you may have from your own company or from another vendor, and Okay, and you can pull out layers that they already have established, or dim styles, or a lot of the configuration stuff you need to have ahead of time. Okay, and you just drop and drag. So simple, so simple, and you get all that good stuff is now in this drawing. Just come back to home, and you see got all these layers now. No effort. Okay, XREF palette still about the same. There is a little drop down by the XREF symbol that lets you be more specific if you want to attach PDFs or images. Although I wouldn't suggest attaching an image through here. There's normally a degraded quality. So let's go ahead and go here to our top. Now these two, just in case you didn't know, this is for your view, so you can do an orthographic or an isometric view. And your conceptualization, or your virtual visual styles, let you switch between 2D, 3D, hidden, and so forth on. Very useful. Normally you want to run in 2D wireframe, but if you're printing or if you're showing someone, conceptual is nice too. Okay, so from here, we're going to go ahead and show you how to do an image really quick. So, what should we image? Let's go ahead and get something nice. Let's say CADWorx 2016. What do we got here for images? CADWorx 2016. Oh, that looks mighty fancy. So let's zoom in and grab that graphic. Okay, we now have it saved to the clipboard. Now this is going to sound a little weird the way I'm going about this. There are hundreds of ways to insert an image. This is the one I find to be the best, in that it keeps up the image quality in a way that others won't. It also allows for editing in a way that others won't. So let me go ahead and go over this. I'm going into the Insert toolbar, OLE object, and from here, it may sound a little bit like backwards. We're going to create new, but we're going to use a Microsoft Word document as our program for that. And the reason for this is because Microsoft Word preserves the image quality a little bit better. Let's see what happens here is we get a little Windows Word file pops up here. Okay, now we have our image in there. Sometimes you want to keep it as... Sometimes you'll get a little bit of white space because this is seen as a text entity at this point. So what you want to do is put it above the text, and that normally corrects the issue. Okay, so we got that. The one good thing is, unlike in the other programs, you can't. Here you can rotate the image, or you can do basic modifications by double clicking on it, and it brings up a contextual menu that lets you correct the image. Add color effects, add artistic effects, whatever have you. We can probably find a nice one. Yeah, that looks nice. A little bit of like matted. Okay, we'll go ahead and you can click save. You don't have to click save. You just click X. It's going to bring it into your model. The good thing about this is if you want to modify it further, you can right click, OLE, open. It brings you right back into that Word document. The Word document isn't attached, but what's happening is the data is saved in the AutoCAD, and you're able to pull it back out at the end. Okay, well, that's all I have for you for today. If you want to know more, just hit me up in the comment line. Peace.